Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. We get together a few times every week, lots of interesting topics. To find out what we're going to be talking about next, go to biseniorcenter.org/calendar and look at upcoming events. Today, we're going to be talking politics with David Harrison, and we're grateful for his vision, wisdom, and humor as we look at what is fraught political landscape. I want to start, though, by thanking Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island for being a sponsor of the Senior Community Center through sponsoring Something to Talk About. They have independent living and assisted living and memory care up on Rolling Bay. And they also have day stay and respite programs. It's a lovely campus. You're invited to come tour. In fact, if you do, they'll be happy to treat you to lunch at the bar and grill there. Call Celia or Jamie at 206-594-1010, 206-594-1010. Or you can just check out their website at fieldstonecommunities.com. The Senior Center and all of us here meeting most of us are on the ancestral homeland of the Suquamish people. David is not. He's over in Martha's Vineyard today, but we are happy to be living here in the ancestral home of the people of the clear salt water. And we are grateful for the stewardship that the Suquamish people have demonstrated through the years, and we are learning from them about how to take better care of these lands and waters. Thank you, David. Again, we have a lot of tumult in the national political scene right now.
We're seeing we've got some new people on today. Welcome to all of you. And as you veterans know, we do this in 3 segments, and we'll take questions in progress, but we're happy to also stop at the end of each segment. The first being whether Kamala Harris and Tim Walz can build from their present situation. The second, a little revisitation of Donald Trump's problems with the law. And then third, and very briefly, we're going to talk a little bit about what will happen to MAGA post-Trump. So that's what we're going to do. My beard got a little whiter today when J.D. Vance talked about what we could do for childcare in America. He said grandparents need to step up a little bit more. I thought, boy, if we step up a little bit more, we see our 3-year-old grandson and 7-year-old a lot. And so I think J.D. Vance needs to be 76 and have a 3-year-old, 7-year-old before he comments on such matters. But that's just my view. A lot happening, obviously. I was before noon when I found out that Juan Merchan is not going to sentence before the election. I was going to talk about 2 bits of awfully good news, and I've come around to the possibility that it's not such awful news, that Trump's not going to get sentenced on September 18th, like it sounded like he was going to, even though some of you have argued that he should be incarcerated. I can explain why I'm not so sure that's such bad news. But let's start with where we stand and what Tier 1 is. Tier 1 is a different situation than we were in 4 years ago and 8 years ago. And it's very important that we reject. The other day, Carl Rove was talking about how things were going for candidates relative to 2020 and 2016. And the point of this election really is the opposite. This election is not comparable in meaningful ways to either of those two, which makes it a little scary, but makes it pretty exciting over the last 6 weeks. So let me start, before we talk about, before we talk about where we go from here and how we can end up ahead on November 5th, or how Democrats can, more accurately, let's talk about how it's not comparable. Who was the change candidate in 2016? It was not Hillary Clinton, as you know. In this case, unbelievably, surprisingly, and excitingly, the change candidate is the Vice President, Kamala Harris. And that makes a huge difference when you've had 8 years of one administration, because 4 years and then 4 years of the others. So, hello, Christina from DC. Hello also to my dear friend John Snell and his wife Liz, who he's been my best friend since 1953, and he lives in Montpelier, Vermont, and he's visiting us on Martha's Vineyard, and hopefully he'll have a pointed question or two. So the change candidate is Kamala Harris. That's huge. Secondly, where is Kamala's advantage? Her advantage is not being the same old thing as we've had with Biden and Trump. Her advantage is also very much the element of surprise. Again, I don't know why Trump and J.D. Vance were so surprised. We weren't. They should have talked to us on this Zoom. All of us were considering the possibility that Kamala was going to emerge as a candidate. At any rate, it took them a long time to adjust. I had a great talk the other day with the head of Mi Familia Vota in North Carolina, and he said, David, you cannot believe the new level of excitement we have in our field work based upon Kamala Harris being the candidate. We're more likely to sustain because choice is on the ballot everywhere, metaphorically. Obviously, it's hugely on the ballot in Arizona and Nevada and Montana and Florida, but it's on the ballot everywhere. And this is a huge boost that was not available to us because Roe v. Wade was the law of the land in 2016 and 2020. All of a sudden, we get the Dobbs decision, and we get millions of voters who would not be voting were it not for the Dobbs decision. The other thing that is creating our base situation now, where we're maybe we're a bit ahead. The polling averages have us maybe 2-3 points ahead, but the swing states that determine what the Electoral College is going to do are not quite as, they're fine. They're just not as comforting as we want to be comforted if we're looking for a full night's sleep. So the third condition that we start from is that Donald Trump's ceiling is different than it was 4 years ago or 8 years ago. 8 years ago, he's the change candidate. He has deliberately, and now for 8 years, played so much to his MAGA base that he's pissed off any amount of independents. So his ceiling isn't quite as high as it was before. And when you have 90% almost of voters already decided, it matters that the people who are undecided have an unfavorable view of you, which is what they have of him, unsurprisingly, since he's basically values-free human being. So at any rate, we go into this discussion of how we can sustain and advance from this position by knowing that the ceiling is different, that choice is on the ballot, and that Kamala Harris is the change candidate. And that is where we start from when we figure out, well, how could we be a little bit more comfortable in terms of polling averages and what's likely to happen in the 7 swing states. And so where I'm going is there's a little bit of good news beyond that. I'm thinking that because Kamala Harris's race is only 100 days long, that her position may be less susceptible to a downslide than it would be if people were beating on her since last November. And it doesn't seem to be the case that things like Comrade Kamala, whatever that even means, are taking hold. So a couple other things that are happening that are worthy of us underscoring before we talk about one piece of good news that I especially want to emphasize. First, the Senate candidates, Democratic Senate candidates in swing states are running ahead of Kamala. So this is true in Pennsylvania, which we really, really want to win. And Bob Casey is running 5-6 points ahead. In Michigan, where Slotkin's running ahead. In Nevada, where Jackie Rosen's ahead. Ruben Gallego ahead in Arizona, Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin. The reason why that's important, of course, as you know, is it's always good to have, if you're on the top of the ballot, be in a strong position. And right now, in some of those states, Kamala Harris is running maybe 2 points ahead, and the Senate candidate like Casey is running 6 points ahead. You actually could win the state with Bob Casey having some people vote for Casey and perish the thought Donald Trump. That's good news. The second piece of good news was going to be that courts were keeping Bobby Kennedy on the ballot in some of these states, which is to our advantage because it gives people some other place to go besides Trump if they're anti-vax or something like that. However, an appellate court ruled today in Michigan and North, covering appellate courts are looking like they're not buying this, and they are going to let, right? We went into this week with North Carolina, Michigan, and Wisconsin still having Kennedy on the ballot, and it's not clear whether any of those are going to sustain that. So that's good news. It's going away. I'm going to talk separately about the legal front, but the shotgun colloquies with Jack Smith and Trump's lawyers yesterday are very, very nice, where Judge Tanya Chutkan has refused to accept any idea that her timing and questioning and sorting out immunity needs to change because the election's in another 6 weeks. So that's good. But the one thing I most want to emphasize before we have questions, thoughts, and concerns on this first section is something that happened. If you heard sound last night, it would have been Republican consultants across the country softly weeping as they hear the news that Mike Johnson and Donald Trump, incredibly, are talking about conditions under which they would try and shut down the government on October 1st. That is, if you went into a magic shop and found the genie's lamp and rubbed the lamp and the genie came out and she said, "What wish do you want?" The wish that you should want is for them to try and shut down the government. It's bizarre. And for Donald Trump to tell Mike Johnson that they should take a great run at that is, there isn't a single time that Republicans have tried to shut down the government that has been advantageous to them at the election booth. And if you're running in a swing district, there are 14 Republicans running in districts that Biden won, and only 4 Democrats running in districts, including Marie Perez, that Trump won. And if you're one of those 14, you're saying, "Oh, please, please, please don't shut down the government." Hakeem Jeffries in his sleep can figure out how to articulate that in such a manner that it will hurt Republican candidates in swing districts. So that's what's going on. The reason why they think it's a swell idea is they want an up or down vote on a new law that would prevent non-citizens from voting. But guess what? It's illegal for non-citizens to vote. So let's pass it. I can promise you that Kamala Harris and Hakeem Jeffries can figure out a way to message that so the public is thinking the Republicans are threatening to shut down the government again. That's a great plus. It's a gift to Harris and Tim Walz, and they should, if there was such a thing as an appropriate thank you note to send to Donald Trump, they should send it. So that's to recap. Then we've got a base vote based upon her being the key change candidate in a time when choices on the ballot, and Donald Trump has a ceiling. And we're looking for ways to boost that further through good Senate candidates, through Mike Johnson's new effort, maybe to shut down the government, for what Chutkan is doing in the courts. And one thing that I didn't mention is if you look at polls in detail, you'll see that we do better among likely voters than registered voters. There's another little kicker there, and you want that to be the case because during COVID there was a huge increase in voting. We can't depend upon that this time, and so starting out with a little extra zing among people who are most likely to mark the ballot is a good thing. What I haven't mentioned, of course, is the debate. You'd like to be ahead whether or not Kamala Harris does splendidly in the debate, but obviously we feel good about her chances. So I think it's appropriate before I stop to think, okay, we're feeling pretty good about this if we're supporters of Kamala Harris, which most of us are. We have a good, solid core position. She's raised $650 million, a third of it from people who don't give money to campaigns. It's been a stunning thing. I saw Sheila Kerwin on Winslow Way the other day. She was skipping, so we know this is a good thing. And so what could go right beyond that, as you know, is we could do well in the debate. Mike Johnson could try and close down the government. Our Senate candidates could do well. All that money we're spending could have an impact, and those are all the good things that could happen. So it falls to us to figure out what could go wrong. What's the banana peel? The banana peel for Hillary, sure, it was Comey, but she ate the banana and put it on the ground. It was let me do private email conversations with foreign leaders on my personal cell phone. What a good idea. And that cost us a lot. Without that, we would have won every one of these elections from 2008 on Obama at all. So given that, what is our possible banana peel? For some reason, she could lose the debate. There might be some scandal we don't know about. It's hard to see where she could find the banana peel, how she could slip. But that's why I feel good today, and that's why I'm about to take your questions, thoughts, and concerns. Reed.
So she's getting a lot of unsolicited advice, as everybody in her position would. But it seems to me like there's some pressure on her to try to articulate specifics on how she would govern. And I know James Carville was saying she should differentiate herself from Biden. It seems like it might not be quite a banana peel, but is she at risk from doing from trying to differentiate herself from Biden, or just kind of keeping it a feel-good, meme-happy candidacy is the safest way to go?
Well, I don't think that characterization is accurate now that she did the CNN interview and she's got some economic proposals and such. I did plan to mention that the distance from Biden on Gaza is a little uncomfortable and one way or another, and that we should be hoping that somehow the Israeli people get Bibi to do a ceasefire, because that would help us and Kamala politically. I think the characterization of her as a non-policy candidate is a bit much by half. Obviously, she's being careful. What strikes me is there was a great column in the New York Times where Gail Collins, it's a huge talent, was talking to somebody else about Kamala needs to do more press conferences and interviews and such and such. And I think, what a crazy way to normalize the fact that she's running against somebody who tried to overthrow the government 3 years ago. Does that mean we're going to have, these discussions over, whether she talked to ABC last Tuesday? I think it's overblown. I don't think the American people, I think she'll do enough to keep the press from beating her up every day. But if we're talking about who's got policy proposals, tell me what Donald Trump ever did that was a policy proposal. I mean, I just don't get this
But
distinction.
it seems like it's people who might be looking for an excuse not to vote for her in a way that might be affected. But yes, I mean, we had Adam Kinzinger at the convention, and now Liz Cheney, and now Liz saying for her father, Dick Cheney, that they're all going to support Kamala because they want to support somebody who actually understands and has responsibility for their role.
Since Dick Cheney made up a war, it's a mixed feeling having him endorse Kamala, but that was too bad that he did that. But yes, I do not think. The short answer to Reed's question is, I don't think the chatter about Kamala's policy proposals or press conferences is a disadvantage to her, and she knows how to watch that. That is, if it ever looks like it's showing up in the polls or is emerging as an electoral disadvantage, she can correct it in a second. It is true that she's trying to be a Kamala that centrists can be comfortable with when she's a politically liberal person, but she's not the first candidate to ever try and sidestep toward the center, and Trump's left a lot of room in the center. Other questions and thoughts, Sheila?
Yes, I just think her campaign people are doing a really good job. I've been very impressed with how they've run her along the different states, into different places. And I'm back to my old statement that one of the main reasons I think that Hillary lost was because she never went to Wisconsin. And Kamala's been there, what, twice, 3-4 times? And of course, Tim's right next door. He might as well be a Wisconsinite. It's just, I think, quite an amazing what display of, in such a short period of time, the display of what the folks have done in this campaign of hers, to be able to bring her out into the public eye.
I think it's been a well-run campaign, and considering it's basically Biden's campaigners and some of Kamala's people and some of Obama's, I think they managed to execute it nicely. They raised a tremendous amount of money. She's out there. I think the distinct, I may have mentioned this last time, but there's something like 200 counties in the Midwest that rural counties that Obama won that Hillary didn't. And Tim Walz is the candidate. Mankato is the center of that world. And Trump having to come out and say, well, Tim Walz shouldn't be called coach because he was the assistant coach, is so ridiculous. Every time it's silly. So Tim Walz is a candidate if you're running a 7 swing state strategy. And the thing with Josh Shapiro is that was more of a blue wall strategy that didn't work so well in 2016. And remember, what's changed is demographics. There are a million Latinos in North Carolina, and traditional labor doesn't dominate quite as much in Michigan and Pennsylvania as it once did. We have a good shot at winning all 7, maybe even a little shot at Florida. But Tim Walz is a strategy having to do with putting and keeping all 7 of those states in play. Other questions or thoughts on this matter? Nothing from Cynthia Schick or Christina Mitchell, some of these veteran operatives, Tom Kilbane, who does not sleep the whole year of elections. He only looks my age. He's only 50. He just has been involved in too many elections. Any questions, thoughts, concerns? So
David, I think, what's his name in Ohio? My good friend.
Jared Brown.
Brown, yeah. I have a picture of him wearing a hat that says Cobain for commissioner. I want to show one of these days.
Maybe that's why
He's running ahead, I think, isn't he?
yeah, 6 or 8 points. So I think that's Marino, as you know, he's running against, and he's just not a first-rate candidate. But that, as you know, because we've talked about the Senate before, we have to sweep that. We have to win all those races, and we're ahead in all of them except Tester. So if we lose Montana, we could be back to 49 senators unless something else happens. That would be our candidate in Florida sneaking up on Rick Scott because Joyce is on the ballot, or it could be this bizarre thing going on in Nebraska where an independent is threatening to beat Republican Senator Deb Fisher, and he'll organize with Democrats. So one of those things could happen, but we could well win the presidency, win the House, and lose the Senate. That could still happen because Tester's in trouble in Montana. These races, like Allred in Texas and Murcaso in Florida, remind me very much of how much some of us wanted Lindsey Graham to be beat by Jaime Harris, and it wasn't going to happen. And Democrats poured a lot of dough. Or back when we thought that Beto O'Rourke would beat Cruz. So things happen. We get excited about things at the margin. The nice thing about Tim Walz and Kamala Harris is they're going to keep us focused on those 7 states and not get too antsy about everything else. Other questions, comments before we go on to the law?
I hope you can hear me. I have the gym. Sorry about that. If there's any background noise. I wanted to say that there's so many people that are behind the Harris campaign. There's the Lincoln Project, yes, but there's Jen Pelletieri, who co-hosted the circus. And so she went to all these Trump rallies. She has joined the Harris campaign. She's got Mark Elias. There is a war machine out there they want this. And they're doing a great job with it.
I only heard half of that. Your sound is breaking up on me. So could Reed paraphrase what?
I would say that, I mean, basically Christina is saying that there's a powerhouse of resources. There's a coalition of people who are stepping up to make sure that they are going to win this. And I think that gets to the excitement that you were talking about earlier that was not present with Biden's candidacy. Cynthia was going to pop in here, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Who's that special guest? You got a special guest with you?
Very special guest.
Famous elected official?
Yeah, yes, and art icon, publisher. I think you might get to this later because you mentioned law, and I'm already feeling anxious about those administrative steps after the election that got in the way of a smooth transition to our next president. And I heard about a law in the state of Georgia that has to do with the slate of electors, and it was very quickly mentioned in Pod Save America, and I couldn't catch the whole thing, but I'm concerned and hope to hear sometime maybe today from you about where we're at with the different states' laws that could cheat us out of the win.
I'm in the camp, the not worried camp.
Okay, thank you.
For this reason, so NPR in their website posted something that was, I'm sure, a story too, but 2 or 3 days ago on why these worries won't materialize. I had done some work on it before then, and the reason why I was not worried is in the 7 swing states, 6 of those 7 states have Democratic secretaries of state, and the other one is Raffensperger, so who's already been through trial by fire. So I think the ability of courts and state officials to keep local certification from gumming up the works saved us 4 years ago, and we didn't have the governorship in a lot of those states, and we didn't have the presidency because the administration of those states, it's mostly handled by Democrats, except for Brian Kemp and the governor of Nevada. I feel pretty good about our ability to address the chicanery at the local level. And yeah, we should talk further about you can check that NPR article is right on point. Other questions? So I was referring, isn't that Debbie Lester with you? So Debbie Lester gets a PUD commissioner from Bainbridge Island, if you don't know her. Any other questions before we go on to the law? So weird things happened. So we've been on this site a long time with each other. And all that time I was telling you folks about everything that was going to happen on the legal front before the November 5th election and back in January. So I had a very long list, and you got to hand it to the millions of dollars Trump has spent, and of course the impeding of the United States Supreme Court. However, I've decided upon reflection after talking to my friends that I'm not that worried that Juan Michon is not going to sentence Trump on September 18th. He would have had to sentence him to house arrest, suspended until after the election. I'm not sure that would have been such an outstanding help. People already know he's a felon, and it might have turned into a sideshow. At any rate, he's decided he's not sentencing till after the election. Meanwhile, the remaining legal issue with legs is Tanya Chutkan coming back to life on the federal district court proceedings in DC having to do with Trump's slates of false electors and other attempts to defraud the election. This is very interesting. Those of you who follow this should check what she said yesterday. But as most of you know, she said that the election date is of no consequence of relevance to her. And that doesn't run afoul of there's a Justice Department edict that you don't start new prosecutions 2 months before the election. This has been in play for 2 years. The indictments have been refiled to be consistent with the Supreme Court's immunity ruling. This is fresh stuff. And for those of you who don't follow it, Jack Smith has to basically submit what amounts to a brief on September 27 that will lay out the indictment and the reason why he thinks it is not disqualified by the immunity ruling. So he scraped out stuff like Trump trying to misuse Bill Barr, and instead he's just left himself with things where Trump was either acting outside of his official duties, or in a couple of cases where he was outside his official duties but got governmental officials like Pence involved. So here's the rub. As you may know, Amy Coney Barrett was huge at the Supreme Court argument about what would happen if a president acted outside his official duties. So the Supreme Court set up 3 standards, not 2. Cases where there's absolute immunity, cases where there's no immunity, like Trump talking to an elector in Michigan or Arizona and asking him to, or Trump's representative and asking them to fake their credentials. And then presumptive immunity, where the court has set some further standards to decide whether freeing Trump from immunity would somehow harm the government. So that's what Jack Smith will be arguing. And he gets a chance to present new evidence or more detailed evidence that was in the indictments. And he'll do that on September 27th. She's not going to seal all that. That's going to be a news cycle. There's going to be a few news cycles on September 27th. And then in early October, Trump gets a chance to respond. And then on October 27th, right before the election, Jack Smith gets a chance to respond to Trump's response. This is all golden. It's a gold. It's what we've got left, but we don't need to apologize for it. We weren't going to have a trial before November, and the chance for Jack Smith to fully lay out basically his case in front of a judge who is not going to be ordered to stop by the Supreme Court because they ordered her to start. So that's in their order that they gave her the test. She needs to sort them out. They're gonna let her do that. There's no appeal between now and the election that's gonna stop Tanya Chutkan. So we should like that a lot. Questions, thoughts, concerns on this matter? They're quite a quiet group. How about my friend John Snell from Hazlitt Elementary School, class of 1953. Questions? Okay, we're going to go on to, maybe it's because my wisdom is growing that I'm getting fewer questions.
Well, if we paid attention to what you said in January, this section would have been much longer.
You know, David, it just must be hard to be you. That's all there is to it.
Looks like Kathleen has a comment.
Oh, I have a question about, I'm remembering when Ken Lay was tried and convicted, but he died before he was sentenced. And that whole conviction got wiped away.
Who's that?
So, Ken Lay, remember, from Enron?
Enron.
Oh, yeah.
Boy, you have a bouncy world out there in Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much for my process.
That's why I'm concerned that he didn't get he's not going to get sentenced until November 26th.
You want him to be alive to receive the sentence.
Yes, I do.
I'm not hoping that Donald Trump goes to prison. I'm hoping that we'll win this election and
Me too.
but I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to go to prison. I'm not happy. I've just found a place in my head where I'm not necessarily thinking that it's a disadvantage to us. With regard to what I said in January, I also in front, and Reed has the tapes, I called the Biden election almost to a T, and I called almost exactly the number of House seats we would win last time. So I feel good. And last November, I said Joe Biden shouldn't run. And I was sure as hell right about that. I think we're so lucky that he didn't face plant in the September debate because we would have lost the election. We are so lucky that they decided to go for a June debate and that his shortcomings were revealed at a time when Nancy Pelosi could do something about it. That's my view. So let's end with a brief meditation on where MAGA goes. As you know, I believe that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz will win. I believe that that's not a sure outcome right now. I think because of they'll clearly win the popular vote. I think the issue is getting to 270 electoral votes. As some of you know, you get to 270 electoral votes by winning Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin among the swing states, plus the split electoral vote in Nebraska, where we're 5 or 6 points ahead. So you're at 270 if you do that. What happens if you lose, say, Pennsylvania, where we're maybe 1.5 points ahead? I don't think we will, but that's why she named him Walz, because she wants to be seriously in play in all those other states, and she is. So if you got North Carolina and Nevada, you'd make up for Pennsylvania, or North Carolina and Arizona. And that's the way they're playing it. They're trying to win a package of those 7 states. And if they're doing well in Wisconsin, they're ahead in Michigan, Whitmer's there with her. So what they're hoping is the combination of Scranton, Joe Biden, Josh Shapiro, and Bob Casey and Fetterman will put them over the top in Pennsylvania. But those polls aren't showing any dramatic lead. And so if you're looking for something to happen in the next 2 weeks, have her do well enough in the debate so that she wins Pennsylvania, and then we can start sleeping well at night. With regard to what happened to MAGA, remember that MAGA was created by a new standard in American recrimination. No one has punished opponents as viciously and consistently as Donald Trump. So you may remember 4 years or so ago, the governor turned representative from North Carolina, Mark Sanford, was done in by Trump, and that got noticed. And there's only 2 congressmen left, the Republican congressmen, who voted for impeachment. There's a reason for that. He's picking them off. Well, how is that possible? The reason it's possible is he doesn't have to beat him in election 50-50. Let's run my candidate against yours. He withdraws his support, and even if that's 15%, it's enough to get him beat, often in a primary and certainly in a general. That's what happened in Washington's 3rd district. Marie Gluesenkamp Perez basically won because he executed Jamie Herrera Butler. So the issue becomes, well, can he do that after he's gotten beat twice in a row? I mean, this is all speculative. Let's win the election first. But on this front, the answer is yes, but not quite as effectively. So while he's alive, Donald Trump will try and veto people who do not subscribe to his vision of what MAGA means. And he'll execute people who were once his friends, like Jeff Sessions, and he'll continue to do that. He'll just be less effective doing it each month during the remainder of his political career, which will last his entire life. The chances that Republicans would nominate him again are 0. It would not happen at 82. That would be unthinkable. I know they've done unthinkable things. They wouldn't do that. So what are we looking at in terms of MAGA? I think the thing to remember is the Murdochs are split. So Rupert Murdoch is 94. His son Lachlan is the one that's driving the bus toward still supporting Trump. The other Murdoch kids don't want this. And there's a big fight within the trust, a big legal fight over who controls the broadcasting empire. And if the kids win the fight, then Fox, being a wholly owned MAGA subsidiary, will stop, which would be nice. So there's that issue. There's also the issue that if Donald Trump hadn't been the host of The Apprentice, he wouldn't have won in the first place. Has Ron DeSantis ever hosted The Apprentice? No. Nikki Haley has wounded herself significantly. They're not going to let her recover, I don't think. So my guess in terms of the inheritor of a somewhat more moderate MAGA is Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, or somebody like him, somebody who has a little bit more respectable credibility, but is still willing to give some allegiance to underlying MAGA-icity. So that's my view. I don't think the possibility that Eric Trump or Donald Trump Jr. are going to be the political leaders in the future is absolutely zero. Christina Mitchell just asked, say more about Haley. It's just a long memory thing. So Nikki Haley running against Biden would win. Nikki Haley running against Kamala might be the change candidate herself. The polls for Nikki Haley before she lost showed her very well. I'm just remembering what people do to candidates when they bear a grudge, and staying as long in the race as she did will be remembered by MAGA. That's why, Christina, you may feel differently.
I mean, it seems to me like the question would be whether her, after, you know, trying to separate herself as far as she could from Trump, and then doing what many of these Republicans have done, change their tune and say, I'm all in, if that he's forgiven people in that sort of situation, including his vice presidential running mate. Is it possible that Nikki Haley has preserved herself to run another day by joining the Trump camp?
I don't think so, because notice all she did was go to the convention. She's not stepping for him, whereas J.D. Vance had sold his soul. There was a great NPR piece that included an interview with speechwriter David Frum, who's known Vance for a long time. And Vance was one time the hope for child of the modern Republican Revolution that never occurred in this generation. And Frum was saying, if you know politicians, and I've known a lot of them, you always know that there's at least one line that they won't cross, and it's always a different line. There's somebody like who's a moderate but would never be homophobic, or there's examples. And they asked David Frum, what is the line when you knew J.D. Vance 6 years ago that he would not cross ever? And the answer was Donald Trump. So there you go.
I know we need to wrap it up a little early here this time.
Other comments, questions, thoughts, concerns? It'll be interesting when we see each other in October. We'll be asking ourselves how she did in the debate, and by then J.D. Vance and Walz will have debated too. So we're going to know a lot more. We're hoping that the national polling average would be like 4.5% by then, and that we would have healthy, discernible polling leads in 7 states. I'm about to do a special project for North Carolina, Mi Familia Vota, and I'm really excited about North Carolina. It's tied, and I think the changing demographic of North Carolina will tell a big tale, and that we will win that state. At any rate, we'll know a lot more a month from now. Those of you who do my blog, you'll see it again in another 3 weeks.
Cynthia's going to try to get in here before you go.
Hey,
Yeah, just to your point about being right so many times, including progress that Mi Familia Vota made. Debbie and I visited the new office of Common Power in downtown Seattle yesterday. Those guys are amazing, and you said that in 2018, and they have just gone for the sky, and it's wonderful.
So those of you who don't know, that was started by David Domke, who used to be chair of the communications department at the U, and he's got a lot of island friends, including Ty Kramer and Steve Romaine. But I got to know David early, and I said all the people willing to travel to him, and they've had great experiences, as you know, Cynthia. And so for anybody who wants to wake up in Phoenix in a couple of weeks, Common Power is definitely what you want to do, because of 2 things. They're very serious about training people for the field, and their selection of field projects is our boots, their ground. They always have local partners that know what they're doing.
Thank you very much.
If you can't do that, don't forget that we all have checkbooks and Venmo accounts, and a lot of us. And don't forget a last little dose of whatever you can afford, especially sent to political organizers, would be a great thing. Thanks for your time. Good to see so many of you.
And if you are interested in sharing this with anyone, I'm going to post it shortly at youtube.com/BI Senior Center, which is where all of our podcasts show up. Thanks, David. Safe
Thank
travels, and we'll talk in November.
In October. Thank you.
October. What? Yeah, we'll talk in November too, I hope. But yes, in October.
Thanks a lot.